Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Want to welcome you to another one of our awesome member open houses. We haven't done one of these in a couple months, so it's good to see some familiar faces on here and give us all a chance to chat. Generally, these member open houses, we present topics and guests that photographers like us all might find interesting and informative, and we're always open to hearing more from you guys of what you'd like to see and what you'd like to learn and discuss. I'm Brian Sheffield. For those who don't know, I'm a senior producer here at Wonderful Machine. And joining me, we have our talented Wonderful Machine staff SEO champ, Ashley Vaught.
Hi.
Ashley's been with Wonderful Machine for about 3 years now, where he advises photographers on search engine optimization. He also works in our publicity department as a writer, editor, and publicist. So today, Ashley's going to be reviewing the websites of 3 of our Wonderful Machine photographers: Nicole Loeb from Boston, Alex Buis from Chamonix, France, and Chana Kassinger in Seattle, Washington, where it's currently 1,000,000 degrees. Ashley, we'll start with an overview of what SEO is and why it's important for commercial photographers. And then he's going to take a look at each photographer's website and offer up some ways and suggestions that they may be able to tighten the bolts on their SEO. Definitely love to have everyone's input and thoughts along the way. Please feel free to throw questions into the text chat and we'll jump on those. And at the end, of course, we'll open it up to questions for everyone to yell out. At this point, gonna hand it over to Ashley.
All right. Thank you for that kind introduction, Brian. So yes, I have been doing, among other things, I've been definitely working on SEO at Wonderful Machine for the past few years. And the more I've been working on it, the more I find it interesting and enjoy talking with people about it. And so I'm happy that we have this opportunity today. I just want to reiterate what Brian said, that I would encourage you, if you have questions, to go ahead and ask them at any point, or and I will try to answer. I may not be able to answer all of them, but I should be able to answer a lot of them. What else was I going to say? All right, so Brian said that I might start off by defining what SEO is, although I think you pronounced it SEO, which I like, Brian, but I don't think most people do that. But so SEO, as most of you probably already know, stands for search engine optimization. And really what it means is, I mean, really plainly, that you're optimizing your site for search engines. So you're really kind of concerned with how your site is going to show up in search engines. So the thing that you kind of need to think about is that when you look at your site, you see certain things, and that means certain things to you. But what you need to think about when you're doing SEO is, how is a Google a robot going to look at it? So because what we're really concerned with are these little, what are called robots, that are little apps by Google or by Bing or any other search engine. And what they do is they come to your site and they crawl over the site. So they read everything that is on your site, and based on that, then they make judgments about where you're going to sit among rankings for certain types of queries or questions. So like if I put in Seattle lifestyle photographer, it's going to go through and find all the candidates for that. The hard part that I like to emphasize here is that you're all photographers and you specialize in images, and yet unfortunately Google's robots are and Google's apps are just not yet able to read photos. And to my mind, being sort of skeptical about technology, I think that's actually a good thing. I think the last thing we want is apps making sense of photos for us. But it does produce a huge problem for you if you want someone to be able to make judgments about what's on your site. And it means that you have to provide textual support that corresponds to that. So, and that creates the next problem. So as commercial photographers, one of the things that you want to do is you want your images to stand for themselves, right? So you want them to be strong and for people to be able to read them and make sense of them, appreciate them, without you imposing text on them that might, say, limit the ways that they can be, understood or appreciated. But that is exactly what Google kind of and other search engines require of you. So to put this one other way, I mean, when I talk with individual photographers on the phone about their sites, I usually like to say that when we're talking about SEO, what we're talking about is free advertising. And I think that's probably a pretty accurate description. We're concerned with this great opportunity that you have. And so like I usually use an analogy of like a billboard. And so if you have a billboard, what do you want to make sure that's on that billboard that represents you in a certain way? So that's kind of the question that SEO is sort of trying to answer. So, but let me pause there and see if there are any questions. No, not yet. Okay. So some of you have probably heard this before. I know John was one of our participants. John Davidson was one of our participants last year. So thanks for coming again, John. So what I'd like to do then, what else was I going to say? Oh, yeah, what I'd like to do then is go through 3 different photographers' sites, and the photographers that we're going to be talking about or talking with today are Nicole Loeb, who is in the center of my screen, but may not be in the center of your screen. Chana Kasinger, am I pronouncing your last name right, Chana Kasinger? Oh,
Silly me. K-singer.
Kasinger,
Like,
okay.
she's an okay singer.
Okay. And then Alex Buis, who I've been told I'm not horribly disfiguring his name. So, and if we have time afterwards, I'd like to open it up to questions, because I imagine there will be lots of questions, and I'm not going to be able to answer everything. But we want to spend at least 15 minutes on each of these photographers' sites, and then make some recommendations about changes that they may or may not make. So let's start with Nicole. So Nicole, I'm gonna share my screen, so bear with me here. But one thing, so I've got your site up, and so I hope you can see it right now. Can everyone see Nicole's site? Yeah. Okay, so Nicole, one of the first things I wanted to ask you about is, we know that you're from Boston, and that's one of the ways that you identify yourself on the site. How would you identify yourself in terms of the specialties that you want to rank for?
Lifestyle and portrait are the 2 focuses.
I'm sorry, did you say, I know you said portrait, but what lifestyle was the second one?
Lifestyle and portrait.
Yeah, okay. What kind of clients are you looking to draw in? So who have you had business from in the past, and who are some of the people that you're aiming for?
Yeah, mainly small to medium-sized companies, anywhere between revenues of 2 to 50 million. Haven't worked a lot with agencies, but would love to do that in the future.
Okay. And so how long have you had your site?
6 months.
6 months, okay. And this iteration of your site is on WordPress. So you're kind of a strange bird, so to speak, from a platform perspective, because even though WordPress is becoming more popular, lots of photographers don't necessarily have WordPress sites. I don't know that there's necessarily any good reason for that, for why they don't. But as you know, WordPress is a very, very solid platform. And so that's the reason why lots of people are choosing it now. So I have taken a little bit of a look at your site, and one of the things that I want to point out to everybody, which I think should be an absolute minimum concern for you, is to look at this up here where I'm pointing with my pointer, and that is what we all know is like a browser tab. But the text that's in there is really what we're concerned with. This is what we call a page title. And I went ahead and did a search for Nicole's site, and everybody can do this with their own site. So you put site : and then in this case, NicoleLoeb.com. And what you're going to get there is how the results that you're going to get are how a search engine has indexed your site. So this is like the record that Google has of all of the pages on your site. For this one, I mean, the first one that comes up, it looks like is Nicole's main page. And she has this information. So it says Boston photographer, commercial, Nicole Loeb, and then there's a little bit more here that's truncated. And so one of the things that we usually tell photographers is there's at least 3 pieces of information that you want to make sure that you have in your page titles. And those are, as you might expect, on the one hand, your brand, so that's your name. But another one is going to be your location if you're trying to rate or rank for that location. And that's actually something I would love to talk about and love to hear what other people have to say about. And the third thing, of course, is going to be their specialty. Now, the question is like what order you put those in. And I think that's kind of a significant question. In the past, I've thought maybe, well, the name of the photographer should be number 1 because that's your brand and that's really essential. But from a SEO perspective, I've been thinking it might be more useful for you to have your specialty before anything. So, I mean, Nicole's choices make sense to me because she wants to rank for her area, and moreover, she wants to make sure that people recognize that she is a commercial photographer, not what I sometimes call a retail photographer. However, of course, in this description right here, we can't see what her specialty is, and instead you start to see it down here in this area. So let me just highlight this. So everybody's looking at this. So this is what's called a page description. And this is information that you would put into the back end of your site. And it will show up on Google, but it won't show up anywhere on your site. And the page description is usually between 125 and 150 characters or so. But that would be the place where you definitely want a longer answer. So the one thing I didn't say before, and so let me stop and ask you if you have any questions, is that your page title should usually be between 55 and 70 characters. So that's the part of the reason why it's truncated here, because Nicole has gone over that 55 to 70 character limit, which isn't a big deal. It's just that that's not going to show up now in search results. So you want to think about it like what actually is going to show up. And so let me stop there and see if there are questions or comments or thoughts. Nicole, do you want to? No?
Sounds good.
Yeah, okay. So when you have this description here, one of the things that you might want to do is separate the different items. So you could have Boston commercial photographer and then Nicole Loeb, which would work. But you could equally also have something like Boston commercial photographer, Nicole Loeb, lifestyle and portrait photographer. Although you may want to avoid the reiteration of certain types of language. So, but at the very least, I mean, one of the things that I would say is that you want to make sure that every distinct page on your site has a unique page title. So, for example, if we look at kids and family, Nicole's already done this. So right up here, you can see that it says commercial kids, and if we look down here, we'll probably find commercial kids. Yep, there it is. So, so this is the page title for that individual gallery. So commercial kids and family. And but note here that one of the things that Nicole's doing is that she has the same meta description or page description here that I believe you're using at other places, which isn't uncommon. Lots of photographers do this. However, as a general rule, I would say that you want to differentiate each of those. So for every gallery, like you would want to have something that talks about your specific specialty as a photographer of children, and that also does family photos. So let me stop there and see, are there other questions or comments or thoughts?
The order of the wording matter. So if it were Boston commercial photographer or Boston photographer commercial, does that have?
That's a great question. So, I mean, it's important in your case, Nicole, you want to rank for Boston. And so I think that's pretty important. But that's not the only thing that's going to determine whether or not you're going to show up in Boston search engine results. But I would say that you should think about it like, usually I think that the specialty is actually more important than the location. And the reason for that is that there are other ways that you can show up for a location. And one of the most important of those is what's called Google My Business. So there's a specific function in Google that you can put in information about your business. And the reason why that's significant is that it provides a location, and then that in turn helps out your site here, which is going to, show up for that location. So, so I actually think, you want to kind of aim at what is it that you want to be sought for. So if you want to be sought for a lifestyle photographer, commercial lifestyle photographer, I might put that first. So I'd put things in order based on their order of importance for your objectives. So what do you want to be sought for? So yeah, so does that sort of answer your question, Nicole?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. So the one thing that is, it looks like here, so let's go ahead and just open these up. Oh, all right. So here
And
is
actually, just a heads up, your just a heads up, you probably can't see it, your daylight calendar notification is up.
Oh yeah. All right. Thank you. I was just going to say here, so here is a different one, and it's good that you have a different page title for this one, Nicole. And I suspect that this text right here is showing up in your meta description, or it may actually be in the meta description. But so it says here, before and after boxer portraits, haymakers for hope. And this text right here, which it looks like is truncated, is actually, I believe, the same text that's in the top of this. So sometimes Google will actually search for language on your page and use that as a meta description if you don't have one. So that's why you want to put that in and include it. And the other thing is, it just kind of goes back to my earlier point, which is namely that it's free advertising space. So you want to make sure that it says the things that you want it to say. So you want to take advantage of this opportunity and not just include other comment that repeats it. So, but other thoughts or questions? So, I mean, one of the things I would say, usually I want to show you how to do some of these things on the back end, but even though Nicole added me, for some reason, I haven't been able to get into your admin. So it's not a big deal. Nicole, thank you for trying to get us in. One of the things I want to try to do with each of the photographers that we talk about today, I want to make some recommendations. And I mean, my basic recommendation for you, Nicole, is that you want to make sure you go through and give page descriptions for all of your most important galleries, and unique page descriptions for those. So, so you would want to have, given the importance of these items, you would want to have one unique page description for lifestyle and unique description for portrait. And for the others as well. But you want to go with one of the most important things that you want to rank for and start showing up there. So thoughts, questions?
Possible to hear me, or I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah, I can hear you, Dalton.
Okay, cool. I tried to put something in the chat, but
Oh, okay. Sorry, I
is
didn't
it-
see that.
no worries. For blog posts as well, do they need a unique page description?
There you want to take advantage of it. So I would say basically anywhere you have an opportunity to put a page description in, you want to take advantage of that. So yeah. And I think even, I'd say especially more so in the blog, because one of the things that most of the photographers I've found is they don't want to include too much language on the pages. So the blog is really kind of an important component of your site insofar as it shows a search engine that you have been sort of updating your site, and that's really important. And it also provides the textual correspondence that you want to, so for some of the information that shows up in like the page title on, say, your main site. So
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
yeah. Other questions? All right, well, let's switch gears then and look at Alex Buis's site. And every time I say that now I'm starting to feel really like I'm butchering your name, Alex. So my apologies. But Alex, you're from is it Chamonix? Is that right?
Chamonix, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, France. And so you're a really interesting case that we have. Because you're one of the few photographers here who probably is concerned with two different languages. So,
to an extent, but the vast majority of my clients are in the English-speaking world, in the UK and the US in particular, even though I'm based in Chamonix. So I don't particularly want to reach out to the French French language clients, or at least it's not a priority.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And so but it's always kind of been an interesting situation for me. Like, would you then want, if you were French and you wanted to rank for those, would you want to have the language that would be unique for those different clients? And that would be difficult because then you would be possibly repeating yourself, and you don't necessarily want to do that. So. By the way, somebody I think has their microphone on and we can hear some background conversation. I don't know who it is, but I just thought I'd point it out. So Alex, you have a photofolio site, and it's honestly, I think it's really a beautiful site. And I think it works really well. It's also got a kind of an interesting design. So it doesn't look like it's got kind of a gallery design, even though it does in the structure. So as you scroll down the page, what you see are technically different galleries in the URL, but it's actually changed as we move down. So like now it says adventure thumbs. And so that's interesting, although I should say I do have some worries about how well it works in terms of performance. So we might want to talk about that. Advantages though that Alex has is that he's on Photofolio, and as all of you know, Photofolio is like the 300-pound 300-pound gorilla in the room as far as like photographer platforms go. It's just a hugely dominant platform, and there are lots and lots of benefits to it. One of the big ones is that it's a lot of money in CDNs, and a CDN is a content delivery network, and it's basically servers that are different locations around the globe, and they make sure that your images come up really quickly. So that's one of the reasons why generally Photofolio sites have really, really strong performance. So let's look at the way that Alex's site shows up for Google. So I mean, right away, you see one of the concerns that I have, which is that even though if you look at these descriptions, the descriptions are unique, actually the page titles are not. And so he's not getting unique page titles. And it's not a terribly big deal. It's just that it's an opportunity that's lost. For these individual galleries, and I think that's something you might want to consider. There are some sort of, let's take a look. Let me open up this and see how it looks here. So again, we see the same page title, and you can see that up in the top. But I mean, the nice thing that Alex has taken the time to do is go through and give unique descriptions for each of these pages. So I think that's really valuable. So the other question I wanted to ask, or I should have asked Alex to begin with, like what are the specialties that you want to identify with?
So I've had a bit of a varied trajectory, and I really started from adventure, and then I tried to branch into humanitarian as well. And then I received a lot of feedback that because I used to have adventure and humanitarian on my website, and I realized it was very confusing for clients. So in the past year, when I updated my website and put this new design on, I have also removed the humanitarian galleries. Right now, they're not available anywhere. So this website is really designed to target adventure clients.
That's a really kind of an interesting point. So I guess if you're doing adventure and humanitarian, does that mean that you have like radically different kind of client sets?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no overlap whatsoever. Yeah. And I think some clients get it because they get that, oh, I can do something else and I can interact with, like for the adventure, it's still worthwhile I know how to take portraits and I know how to do like more documentary style. But for a lot of clients, they just don't get it. They don't understand, like they can put me neatly in a little box. And I think that is detrimental.
So I'm kind of glad we got into this because this is an issue that I suspect other photographers are going to ask about, and that is that, like, on the one hand, given that you're all commercial photographers, you probably want one site that functions as your commercial identity. But on the other hand, some of those specialties are not completely, they don't play well with one another, and that sounds like that might be a way that you might describe that, Alex. So yeah. I wonder, have you given some thought to like having unique sites for, say, adventure and for humanitarian?
Yeah, that was the plan, and then I kind of ran out of time to implement that. But the plan would be to have adventure.alexpace.com and then humanitarian.alexpace.com, and maybe a splash page that asks you to like choose your own adventure. Are you interested in the adventure or the humanitarian mark? That's one thing I've thought about, and the other thing I've thought about is maybe having just the main website, because that is still the majority of my income, be the adventure, and then have alexpace-humanitarian. That would be separate completely.
I think along with that, I'd be really interested to hear, do you find that those types of clients find you the same way?
No, they don't. The humanitarian work is a lot more, you apply to job because it's with big NGOs, or you hear about jobs and then you apply and then they go and check you out. And I find it's a lot less organic than the adventure client, which is more traditional commercial right. work.
Yeah. Has that influenced? I mean, it looks like that has influenced your strategy on your site. So.
It has, because right now it's not ideal, but I am able to just have literally a PDF portfolio accessible with a unique URL, and that's what I give to NGO clients when they want to hire me. And it's not ideal, but it's working enough until I can actually get around to making those choices.
Well, I mean, and I might say, if I'm going to jump in here, and you can obviously feel free to disagree with me, but I mean, it's also a lot of work to maintain two different sites. So yeah, that may be something you just don't want to do. And so it's kind of funny because on the one hand, your site functions as primarily a portfolio, but of course, portfolio, the contents of your portfolio can be very diverse, and so it's a question about how you arrange that.
And for me, I where I really struggle is I can see the humanitarian stuff actually being appealing to potential adventure clients in showing them that I am unique and I bring more than the quote unquote run of the mill adventure photographer who only does adventure. Right. And I want to have a way to showcase that without necessarily being front and center.
Right. That's interesting. How long have you had your site?
On Photofolio since 2014, and the current version is from about a year ago.
And then did you have a site that wasn't on Photofolio before this?
I actually built my own website before that, between 2008 and 2014. And then right. I just couldn't keep up with JavaScript and all the web technologies. Yeah.
So let me pause and see if do other people have questions or thoughts about this, about Alex's site. One thing I wanted to do, since I have access to a back end of Alex's site, is I just wanted to show some people where he would make some of these changes. And so, I mean, one of the basic things with Photofolio is that it has these two settings you should be able to see right here, a global browser setting and then an advanced SEO setting. And you have both of these turned off, and I would think that those would actually be a good thing to have them off, just because that forces you to provide information for each of those individual pages. And I think that's important because that's really what you want to do in the end. Whereas with the global browser title, one of the things that does is it kind of creates an identity that you're going to use on each individual page. So, and you may not want that. You want those to be unique. So, but let's look as well at the, let me go ahead. So one of the things as well we can see here in the media library. So this is the folder structure. Wait, no, that's not the folder structure. So here's the folder structure for the site. And if we look at these individually, we're going to see that there's a possibility for each of these to provide text that's unique to the images. And this kind of gives you the opportunity, if you'd like to use alt text, which generally I recommend for photographers, but it does take a lot of time. So normally what I've been in the recommendation of doing is making sure that you are using alt text as you're going forward, but don't necessarily go back and make all of those changes, because I mean, as you can see with Alex's site, he's got tons and tons of photos, as all of you do, and you don't want to make those changes. That would just take such an incredible amount of time. One other way to get around this problem is actually to consider the naming practices that you use with all of your images. So one of the things that I encourage photographers to do before they load their images onto their site is to use a practice with their naming. So they want to use their specialty, again, especially for those particular photos, the location that they want to rate for, as well as their name. And those are the kind of things that you would want to separate with dashes, not underscores, which I can go into, but it would bore you to tears, so I don't want to go into that. The reason why that's significant is because if you don't have time to do alt text, which I imagine all of you don't because you want to go and take pictures, then this is sort of a way to add alt text. So it provides a way that Google's robots can read through, and they're going to find these images, and they're going to use the title of that image in order to make sense of what's in that image. So like, for example, for this one, you have part of that here, Alex. Let me see.
So just to mention, that's an old gallery that's not in there anymore. So maybe if you click on any of the 2010, I think those are actually Oh,
Okay.
never mind.
Oh,
I thought I had updated these.
well, you probably have some of them.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things you are doing is like you're using the word aerial in here, and I think that's important because that's one of the types of specialties that you want to, identify with. So, but yeah, I mean, as you can see, and I don't think you're obviously the only one, Alex, here. There's lots of opportunities. So, are there questions or thoughts about that last point? Alex, did you?
Yeah, just a quick question, because you mentioned doing that before uploading the files, but I found that portfolio is kind of funny in how it orders things. So I found that I named them like that with the order I want them to appear, and then afterwards I renamed them, which I seem not to have done in this case. Does that make a difference?
So that's a great question. I mean, I've found Photofolio's backend actually really, really finicky in terms of the information that you would provide for those individuals. So like if I'm gonna say, yeah, edit selected item. So it's going to show me for this one, this title, and then I can put a caption here, but then I can also add all of this other information here. And so one of the reasons why I suggest this naming procedure is so you don't have to go through and fill out these things. The title is going to automatically be drawn from the file name, but it doesn't necessarily need to have that. But to answer your question, I think I don't know that I would say that, well, I would still say I think I'd do it before I loaded them up, because you're going to want to change the order of those. And that's not really what's important, the order. What's important is that you just have this very basic information for those. Does that sort of answer your question, Alex?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions or thoughts? Anyone else here?
I have a portfolio site, and also does Google prioritize one or the other of those? And so, and if it does, or even if it doesn't, is it just as effective to put your location in the image description as it is the image title?
So that's a good question. I mean, I think about it kind of like this, I guess I'd answer, is that one of the things that used to take place in the early years of the internet was what's called a keyword stuffing. And that was when you, like, on a particular page, you wanted to add all of the particular keywords that you might possibly be sought for. And what ended up happening is Google and other search engines wised up to this, and they said, we're actually going to penalize you if you do this. So anymore, when I talk with photographers, I usually tell them, like, use a sparing number set of keywords and don't repeat them or try to find every iteration of this. But again, this actually answers your question, Angela. You do want to have those keywords in different fields, right? So that's why you want to have a keyword in your page title, you want to have a keyword in your page description, and then you want to have that keyword, say, on the text if it's on the page somewhere. You want to have it if it's in your file name, that's great. If it's in the alt text or in the caption, that's great as well. Those are all distinct fields. And what I like to say anymore is that Google is like a really, really bad reader. So it goes to your site and it says, oh, I see this and this and this, and these all correspond in different fields. And that's how I know that Angela is this kind of photographer. So that doesn't really answer your question specifically, but I don't know that I would say that one is more important than the other. I do think that if I was going to do anything, I would definitely fill out alt text before I might even fill out captions. First of all, most of the time, you probably don't even want captions to show up on your site. At least that seems to be the case for most of the photographers I've seen. But the other thing is alt text originally functioned to provide a visual or a textual description of whatever was in the photograph. And this was for people who might not be able to see what's on a web page. And so that's an accessibility issue. And that seems like it's secondary, but accessibility is becoming increasingly important for Google and other search engines. They want to know that you're trying to, or that you're thinking about the people that are coming to your site. And so that's why you want to take advantage of that alt text and try to put in, I would say, a fairly specific description of those images. So that might be where I would focus my time if I had the time. But if you don't have the time, then do it in the file names. So, but I do think alt text is really important, even though it doesn't show anywhere up on the front of your site. And it's something that really only Google is going to read, but it's still important there.
And do you have an example of how you can fit to work in your location? Like, for example, his images are all of other locations, I'm assuming, other than where he lives.
Yeah.
Does the alt text have to actually make sense? How do you work that in?
That's a great point. I mean, I think in this situation, like I would have, so the alt text should say something like, in this particular case, it might say Mont Blanc aerial photo by adventure photographer Alex Buis. And then I might add the location after that. But or I might even say it's like add the France-based adventure photographer Alex Buis. So that might be another way to think about it. So, but I could see why you would want to think about it as sort of confusing. But that's raises another point, which is that alt text is meant to be like the type of text that you would use in a conversation. So it's not just throwing a bunch of words. So it has to be a sentence, or at least a phrase that makes some sort of sense. So it's not like a page title. A page title can just be this, this, and this. Whereas alt text and page descriptions are really meant to be what are called natural language. So.
And then just one more question. So then if you do that for every single image, for the alt text on every single image, and that is like, for me, just add at the end, by commercial photographer Angela DiCenzo, based in San Francisco, I guess, would that be considered stuffing because you're doing it on every single photo?
Yeah, I've wondered about this as well. I mean, I don't think it's stuffing, because stuffing is like when I put commercial photography, comma, commercial photographer, comma, San Francisco commercial photographer, comma. So I'm repeating it all in the same one. But so I think it would be distinct because we're talking about distinct records. So we're talking about this particular file name, not say the one alt text for that file name. So I think it's different if it shows up in unique places, unique fields. So
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Other questions, Dalton? I can't hear you. I think you're still muted.
Say you have done that stuffing in the past, and then do you need to go back and undo that?
I would say you should, because yeah, I would say you should fix that, correct that.
So, like to what? And I guess like, for example, like I've had a blog for 5 years, and so like probably the first 2 years I did that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I would go back and fix anything, but I might say going forward, not do that anymore. So I guess that's the way I would put it. Like, if you think it's really egregious, I've seen egregious cases where like people have like 1,000 keyword field, and that's, yeah, if you have something like that, then maybe you want to change it. But I would say your energy is probably better spent on like writing great blog posts about the work that you've been doing. So yeah. And so that's raises another point that I just wanted to make. But Dalton, did you have another question?
No.
No.
Maybe.
Which just my other point was just going to be that you want to keep in mind that like all the suggestions I'm making here, none of them unfortunately are going to make dramatic changes which are going to raise your site's ranking overnight. Or to put it slightly differently, there is no one silver bullet. I think that what you're trying to do is, to make your site function as well as it can for search engines. But the changes that you're putting in place are not going to see effects for some period of time. So, but you want to, to be thoughtful and to make those changes and expect that they're going to, increase you as things go on. And then as well, it's a strategy, right? It's always a strategy. And that means that you're concerned with specific market conditions, right? What are your clients looking for? And how you want to rate yourself. Maybe you're tired of the specialty that you've been working on and you want a different set of clients. Well, that's a time when you also need to make a lot of changes in your SEO, your strategy. So, but so the last photographer site that I wanted to get to was Chana's. And Chana, are you still there? I can't see you, but you're probably still there. So. So Chana, do you want to start us off? So Chana is an interesting case. Chana's site is actually on the 22 Slides, which is a platform that I have to admit I'd never heard of before, but it's pretty slick. I mean, I really like the way your site works. How long have you had
I
this
just
site,
went through
Chana?
my Gmail. I've had it since 2014, so 7 years.
Nice. And are you pleased with it?
Any concerns I've ever had, I just email the guy who founded it. I don't even know how I found like this platform, but he's addressed my concerns. Like one of the things that kind of annoyed me was that I couldn't figure out how to like have a hover or text over the photos, so prospective clients could see who the work was done for. So if you go to commissions, you can see that. But things like that, I've been pretty happy with it. It's easy for me to use. It's streamlined. I've gotten good feedback.
Yeah, no, I think it works really well, and it's got a certain simplicity that I like. I noticed when I was looking at it that these menu items were sort of funny. Like they don't necessarily always appear right away as menu items. So like I know they are because I've looked at it, but I have spoken with other people about your site, and we kind of were thinking about that sometimes those don't necessarily show up. We're so used to having menus being on the left side, and so we kind of expect those sorts of things. I don't know that that's necessarily something that you need to really be that concerned with, but I thought I would point it out to you at any rate.
Yeah, in a previous iteration, it was like that. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind.
But so let's look at the way that Kona's site shows up in, pardon me, in Google. So I think right away here you see, I mean, like what we saw with Alex's site. So the page titles are definitely have Kona's name in them, or I'm sorry, Chana's name in them, but they could have more information, right? So, and they probably should. That's unique. So, Chana, how would you identify yourself in terms of your specialty?
Yeah, kind of to echo what Alex was saying. It's I feel like prospective clients are always wanting to like put you in a box, but I started out as a music photographer. I think now just my sweet spot's editorial and commercial with a focus on portraiture. So, for example, I recently got a commission from Amazon that was a commercial job that was essentially to, kind of shoot something in an editorial fashion. So kind of the intersection of those two, if you will.
That is, so I'm glad that we had a chance to talk about your site then, because I mean, one of the things that I've always wondered if editorial and commercial clients find you the same way? Because I guess I sort of suspect that editorial clients are largely, they may work more on word of mouth, but that may be completely false.
I think networks like Diversify Photo and, you know, Wonderful Machine, of course, and, you know, Women Photograph are really, really essential in kind of getting that traffic.
Yeah.
You know, I always try to ask people, like especially editorial clients, where they find me. And, you know, sometimes they'll say Google, sometimes they'll say a platform. And it always surprises me when they just find me off Google, because I mean, you type in Seattle editorial photographer, and I feel like I'm nowhere near the top of that list.
It ends up being kind of difficult even to show up even for some of local local searches when especially in a larger city. So so that's one thing. I mean, I see here, this is on your one of the other galleries. It does say Seattle-based editorial and commercial photographer, but it doesn't look like that's on the main one. So instead here, this text right here looks to me like the text that is in your hover for those images, right? So,
Yeah.
so this is an example of what I was trying to say before, which is that if Google doesn't find text that would be a page description, it will take that from the page and use that as a page description. So like, my concern here would then be that like this is an opportunity that's kind of lost, right? Because here you could have, and I'd say on the main page of your site, you definitely want to have that information there, right? So like this is a description that at the absolute least should be there, but this one is still not really telling us about the specialties that you want to rank for. So yeah, so let me stop there for a second and see if you have questions, Chana, or thoughts. No. So it looks like, so here, this is interesting. I don't know why it's showing us this link here, but
oh, I do. So when you go to commissions and you click over the photo, it will go to that.
I see. All
Yeah,
right.
which I think, I don't know, a lot of people like kind of miss that, but it does link to those articles.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that makes sense. You want to definitely have those kinds of links. So that's another thing that I don't think I've talked about yet, but I think is important is that, like, so I think it's really valuable here that one of the things you have in this, I don't forget this hover text is that you do talk about your client, and I think that's really important. So you should, it's great that you're taking advantage of this opportunity, especially with some of the clients that you have, which, and of course the subjects, because people are, lots of people are searching for photos of Kamala Harris, and you want to have that somewhere. So your image may be able to be found that way. So, but what else was I going to say? Oh, so let's look at the back end of Chana's site. Sorry, Chana, I know I keep butchering your name. Please forgive me.
No, you got it. You got it.
So here it says site description, and I know that that's showing up in at least one of the places, although it doesn't look like it's showing up in the main one. But so like here, and I'll delete this afterwards, but I'll just show you. So like Chana, you might show up, add information like, say editorial and commercial photographer. But based on the things that we've already been saying, this is the kind of thing that you might want to give some thought to, like whether or not you want that before this or before your name. So, I mean, I think on your main page, it seems to make a lot of sense that your name should be first, but it's a question, really. It's kind of like your strategy. What choice are you going to make? And then I know there's going to be a way to set up the different names for different galleries. So that's something that you would want to make some changes with. So thoughts or questions other photographers, other people have here?
I have an unrelated question, like not to any of these sites, but just like a general question.
Okay.
Are you seeing any correlation between Google AdWords spends and search results?
I think there are because, I mean, uh, uh, it sounds like I'm encouraging you all to like pay money for Google AdWords. I think that there are, in my experience, that so. I mean, one of the things that it does, the nice thing about the experience of Google AdWords is it teaches you a little bit about the keywords that you need to know in order to use on your site. And so at the very least, so Google AdWords has that keyword planner there, and you can use that and then in turn use those kind of keywords on your site in locations that might work for that. So, but yeah, that's an interesting question. Have other people used AdWords, and have you seen it had any effect on your traffic after you were done using that?
I mean, I've been using it for years. I don't know if there's a correlation between the amount that I spend and the results. But I've been using it for so long at this point, I would have a hard time looking at the before because my site and work has evolved so much since before I started.
Yeah. We at a Wonderful Machine now and again. So we, if you've noticed, if you looked at the report card items, we have been doing that for the past few months, and then we have done it in the past as well. And it does seem like there's some correspondence, but it's really hard to tell. So, other questions or thoughts? I'm going to stop sharing now and kind of open it up and see what questions everybody else has. So, and I'm sorry, I couldn't tell who that was who was speaking, because was that you, Doug?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I see your name is highlighted. So, what kind of words do you use in your Google search or Google AdWords, Doug?
Let me take a look.
Have other people here used Google AdWords? Anyone else? No?
It's something that I turned off during most of the pandemic and just recently turned back on when vaccinations kicked up in April or so. Let me look at my spending here.
And if there are other questions that people have, please feel free to jump in. I know there's lots of things that I haven't talked about and that we mention when we do SEO audits. So when we do an SEO audit for a member photographer, we go through a list of 12 to 15 different categories. And we've talked about a couple of those during this conversation. But unfortunately, there's lots of other things that we just don't have the time to go through at present. But if you do have questions about that, I'd love to try to answer some of them. The other thing that I just thought I'd point out is that more recently, one of the things that we've been doing with some member photographers is providing sort of a one-on-one instruction about SEO. So, I mean, the audit that we do is where we're going through your site and examining it according to these 15 different categories. But we've also been doing some consulting work where I've kind of had meetings with photographers and talked with them very specifically about changes that they want to make, because they may want to learn about this process. They want to learn how to do it themselves. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And then we function there as kind of helping them make these decisions and talking through them. And then when you don't have time to do that, we will do the implementation. So and take care of some of those changes yourself for you. So.
And Ashley, I have a question going back to Chana's site.
Okay.
Any other recommendations you'd make for her, and specifically, and correct me if you guys discuss this, I know that Chana has some celebrity portraiture. How would you recommend accounting for that, or these high profile names within her site?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because when I was talking with you, Chana, I was just talking about the Kamala portrait, and actually you do have it as a you do have caption. So this is a portrait for Bloomberg, and you do have that information in the caption, but it didn't show up in the hover. But I mean, I think that those are examples where you want to definitely have that information in the alt text as well as in the file name. Not necessarily because your photograph is going to show up if I just typed in Kamala Harris and then looked at all the image examples. But it's one of those things that helps establish you in this particular case as an editorial photographer. So you have evidence there as being an editorial photographer, and Google is kind of making sense of that with its robots. So I also just think it's kind of one of those things that you'd want to have on your site because it reflects well on your ability. Like if you're taking pictures of vice presidents, or at that time vice presidential candidates. But yeah, that's a good question, Brian. Chana, did you have thoughts about that, or?
My question is, so like when you hover over, you see the link, right? Then you click through and it takes you there. Would it be advantageous to have the caption title as well? So like, for example, it just has the link to like the Bloomberg thing with Kamala. So should I put Kamala Harris and then the link?
Actually, I mean, when I'm clicking on it, it's not taking me to, I mean, we may be talking about different ones, but it's not taking me to the Bloomberg site. So I don't think there's a link there. Instead, it just shows me the image in a kind of a larger view. So,
Oh, okay, interesting. Maybe that one's a bad example. The next one, or the one over to the left, apricot for glamour.
Yeah, so those ones are definitely
it does
working.
show up.
Yeah. And I can see that they're showing up in different ways. Like on the one hand, they're showing up in the hover, but it looks like it's also showing up in some other category. Like maybe it's alt text or something, or maybe it's the image title. So, but yes, does that answer your question, Chana?
Yeah. Thank you, Ashley.
So good. Other questions or thoughts? Or Dalton, yes, I already answered your question. Sorry, I just happened to notice that those were in the chat. So
Angela, did you have a thought?
Yeah. When you were speaking of, this is kind of back to the stuffing issue, when you were speaking of keywording earlier and you were kind of naming off all the different versions of, commercial photographer, San Francisco based commercial photographer, wouldn't you want to put all those things in your keywording wouldn't you want to insert all those keywords in? Not like repetitive as in, the singular and the plural of things, but for the most part, wouldn't you want to put all those in?
Well, I mean, you don't want to, I think you want to think about it like this, like you're making a choice, like which is the way you're going to represent yourself. And this is the same thing that you do like on, say, a business card or like any of your professional data. So like you say these things about yourself and not other things about yourself. And I think your site has to make those same choices. The more that you're not making those choices, the more there's opportunity for Google's robots to get confused and say, well, she says this, but she also says this and this and this. So, so I would say no. I mean, I think you just want to have this one description, say the type of photography that you do, and you want to have it in different places. So yeah, I'd say, I mean, it would be ideal if we could have all of those, but I think that's precisely where Google is going to start to penalize you. So
if you have it at the keywording level and then also the image description level and then in the site description, it's like you kind of
Right.
want it in all those places, but then there's a fine line between having it there and having it be interpreted as stuffing.
Okay, so I'm sorry. So with stuffing, we're doing it all in one of those particular fields. So like I have a field that says lifestyle photographer, lifestyle photography, San Francisco, lifestyle photography. Whereas we're talking about having that keyword in distinct fields so that you are trying to identify with. So, and that is, I mean, I think that's the important point here, is that we're talking about different fields of data. And in those different fields of data, you want to have, say, those certain types of keywords repeated over and over, because they indicate that, well, both in her page title and her page description and in this caption, she is identifying herself in this way.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Good. Other questions or other thoughts about this? I know we only have a couple of minutes left, but
Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us, and you can certainly reach out to Ashley and or myself or anyone on Wonderful Machine anytime for help. This video will be recorded and put up on our site, as well as all the past member open house presentations as well, which is in our intel section on the site. Hopefully those will be a help with people in the future. And like I mentioned in the beginning too, please reach out and let us know if there's any subjects or topics that we should address in the future on these. Would be great.
Thank you as well to our volunteers, Chana and Alex and Nicole. I appreciate you all letting us take a look at your site, and thank you for everybody for coming here. So
thanks everyone. Hope everyone has a great holiday weekend.
Yeah.